In 2025, I sold over $1 million worth of product on Amazon, and this is episode 11 of me scaling my business to $3 million this year with online arbitrage. In this one, we're going to break down the second week of March and show you everything that I've been doing this week. And before we go ahead and jump in, if you guys want to sign up to my free newsletter, link is in the description below. I write a post once every week on Wednesday, and feel free to sign up and let's go ahead and get into it. So as we can see on screen here, we have bought about 1,000 units. You guys can see that there's like a 0.7, so I still need to finish off a unit in full, which I plan to do this week. We had a purchase that we had a misalignment on. So essentially my VA forgot to buy like the last bit of the stock that we needed. So that's why there's like a 0.7 there. ACOG's looking at about $21.50-ish cents. ASP is about $42 with unique ASINs looking at about 71 this week. And then we're looking at about a 34% ROI, 17% margin with estimated sales at about 42K. We spent about $21,500, and you can also see I added a new section called the on hold section. Okay, so I just totaled up all the numbers from the amount that we spent on hold this week. So we have 7,200 bucks on hold, which would push our spend close to about 30K this week. So not a bad week in terms of spend. Need to get those numbers up a little bit. And then we have $7,300 in profit as well. Coming to the bottom here, we can see our net profit for the first 2 weeks of March is looking to be about 12K. And then our net margin is looking to be about 12.54%. So let's go ahead and jump into the Google Sheet, and I'll just kind of show you guys what we got going on in there. And then from there, we'll hop into Seller Board. Before I forget, let me go ahead and show you guys the Seller Central payouts this week. So you can see we took quite a good amount of payouts this week, and that totaled us to about $85,000 in total payouts. So that's just for the first 2 weeks of March. So we've really been stacking up the payouts, and I think our cash conversion at this point is probably positive, which is really good because now if we want to start spending more and more money, we actually have the cash on hand to do so. Now with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into the Google Sheet. And here in the Google Sheet, we can see everything and all the stats that we have laid out here. So we can see we've spent a total of $53,000, and our profits are looking at about 17K before all of our fees and stuff like that. We're already at about 100K in revenue. We're looking at about a 17%-ish gross margin, and then we're also looking at about 32% ROI. You can see in total, we've bought about 2,300 units with an ACOG of $22.88, and then also an ASP of $43.76. Okay, and if we take a look at where we're at in terms of spend needed versus spend that we have a difference right now of about 10K less in spend than we need. But again, considering that we have about $7,200 pending right now, we're pretty close. We're probably only off by about a day. So I'll take that. I think next week we definitely got to turn up, but it's also been tough because of the stuff that I'm going to kind of talk about later in the video. But profits, we are looking positive. We've had a solid margin this month, so just got to keep it up. Got to keep the margin going up. All right, so now you guys were able to see that. Let's go ahead and hop into Seller Board and see how much we actually made for this week. Okay, so in Seller Board this week, you can see I already got the calculation for our overhead pulled up. But before we get into that, let's go ahead and look at what the numbers are right now. So you can see we've sold about $65,000 in sales this week with over 1,300 units, 55 refunds, and a gross profit of about $10.5 thousand. 55 refunds and also about 10K in profit this week. So definitely not a bad week, but we're going to go ahead and see what the net numbers on that is. Before we get into that part though, you can see we have a 4.15% refund rate this week. So pretty good, pretty standard as what we're seeing. And then also a 16.37% gross margin. So as long as I can stay in that 15 to 16% range, ideally 16% or more, we'll be looking pretty good. So let's go ahead and get the net numbers. All right, and you guys can see this week we made a total of $7,800. That is net. So let's go ahead and take that $7,800 and divide it by our sales to see how much margin we made on the week. Okay, and you guys can see here on screen, we did actually cross the week with a 12% net margin, which is really, really good. I think this month we're probably going to end at about 11 to 12%. So this is pretty accurate here. Obviously accounting for a little bit of nuance just with like us using $1.40 for all of the units that we sold here. So it's a little bit nuanced, but overall, I think this is going to be pretty accurate. And yeah, it's great to see that we're doing, margins like this with the amount of volume that we're doing. So now we'll jump into what I was kind of doing this week and explain a little bit about why I feel spend has been a little bit lackluster. So let's go ahead and get into that part. All right, so you guys can see on screen here that I was basically doing training and hiring this entire week. So I wrote out a little thing because I did want to give some value to you guys in this video when it comes to, maybe you're hiring your first VA or you're maybe training your first VA. And I know that this process can be super overwhelming and very intimidating because you don't really know how to filter out bad prospects. You don't really know how to hire the right person. And then even if you do hire a good person, you might not even know that they're good because you don't know how to train them right. So I'm going to go ahead and go over my hiring and training process just a little bit because that's pretty much what I was doing all week. Also, of course, in the mix of just spending money, running the business, doing other things, making content for you guys and stuff. So it's been an extremely busy week, but let's go ahead and get into this. So here's what I wrote down. I officially hired 2 new sourcers onto my team. The plan, like I said from last week, is to split test them and basically see which one is going to be better than the other. I probably am going to make a cut between the two. Reason why is because I think sourcing is something that takes probably the most time to get good at, and it's also something that if someone has a natural gifted ability to do it, it's much better to go with that person than someone who's maybe more fit for like an admin role. Also, it requires a certain kind of motivator within just an individual themselves to actually go ahead and be able to work with no supervision or little supervision and still be able to produce a lot of great results. So we're just split testing the 2 applicants that I had hired from last week, and if they're both good, I guess I'll keep both, but likely what's going to happen is one's going to get cut, and I'm going to kind of make that decision at the beginning of April. So we're going to run through about a week's worth of training, and then they're going to have 2 weeks on their own. They'll be sending me and my guy Ram a couple of Loom videos, which if you don't know, Ram is my sourcing pretty much operator at this point. And if you don't know who Ram is, he's basically my product sourcer right now, but he's going to be running the entire sourcing department of our company. So because of that, these guys are going to be basically working with me and Ram just to make sure that they are getting trained properly. They're going to send some Loom videos. We're going to give them feedback, but that's down the line. So let me go ahead and run you through the actual process that I plan to implement. So the way I like to train new hires, particularly for sourcing, is we first give just a business model overview. Okay, so in here, I'm just breaking down, this is what we do, this is how we make money, so that it gives them an understanding of what job they're actually fulfilling and why it's important. Then we move on to the actual training process, and this gets broken down into a few steps, and it's going to be day by day. So one thing I messed up on majorly when I hired my first sourcer is I just hired them and taught them the process and then literally had them go do it. That is not going to work when you're hiring a fresh meat applicant who's never sourced a product in their life. They need to understand why they do each part of the process and why each part is important. Okay, so what I like to do is break it into a day by day training ritual, and it goes for about a week. So we have, I think, 5 or 6 different lessons, and then the last day is them getting all their materials, making sure they can log into everything, and then after that they're ready to start. So what I like to do is we'll get on call at the same time as me and Ram, and then I'll have them join the call with us. Okay, we get on call at like 10 a.m. Eastern time, and again, we have like a 6 to 7 day training process. Each day we're breaking down a new part of the sourcing process to give full understanding of what the importance for that particular lesson is. And then after we wrap that particular call up, okay, so it's literally just like an hour-long call of me breaking down a segment. After we wrap that call up, I like to send both of the new hires a quiz over what they learned today, and then they're going to answer the quiz to make sure that A, they were paying attention and taking notes, and then on top of that, that they actually have a real understanding. And if they have problems answering the questions, I like to go in there and give some personalized feedback so that they know exactly what is expected of them and what is the right answer moving forward. So that's essentially the way I like to train for sourcing. Admin's a little bit different, but I think regardless, it's a pretty good way to go about training anyone. With training, you have to understand that people need a reason as to why their job is important, and they need to understand that. And then they also need to understand why each part of the job is important. So it's not just the job itself and just the broad process. It's like, okay, why is storefront stalking important? Why is doing Keep a Product Finder important? Like, you got to really break this stuff down, because somebody who is completely new to this is not going to understand why they shouldn't skip XYZ part of your sourcing process. All right, so that's just a little bit of advice that I can give from somebody who's now hired, over 3 virtual assistants and is literally about to hire 3 more virtual assistants. That's just what's worked well for me. So the next thing that I'm going to be doing this week is creating a job post for another PO buyer. So on top of more training, I created yet another role to be filled, which is going to be for a purchase order buyer. My goal with this is to leverage my admin ops manager to do most of the training work for me, and then to get her to higher up levels in our company. So essentially the whole point of making this hire is because I need somebody on the admin department to literally just oversee everything and the people working within that department, because sometimes I find myself like kind of creeping in there and I gotta like pull myself out and be like, they can handle that stuff. But more so I just need a better reporting structure. And I think having the girl who's been with me since day one, being able to oversee everything on the back end is going to be very beneficial. And also she can step in and assist when we are backed up on orders. We have coverage now for orders because we were running into coverage issues. So all in all, this is just for peace of mind, honestly, and also to make her a more important figure in the company. So literally this week, I just plan to be doing hiring and training, and then on top of just running the business, making content. So it's going to be a lot, to be honest. Like, this is going to be a pretty difficult month in general, but I just really hope that we can hit the spend goals, kind of go as fast as we can with this stuff, get it out of the way, not rush the process at all, but I will say just make it to where I can get it done because I know it needs to be done, and I'm going going to be exhausted, but it's like, I just got to do it because I know it's time and I know it's the next thing that I need to do. So I'm not going to push it off and delay it. And that's kind of the struggles and talking points that I wanted to make in this week's episode, is that training and hiring is always going to be something that is physically and mentally draining for any of you guys, whether you're hiring multiple people, doing multiple positions, or just your first person. It's difficult because it does take time away from making money in the business, but you got to remember, you can't rush a process like this, because the whole point of hiring a new person is to fulfill human hours that are no longer worth your time doing. You are now worth more than whatever amount of time it takes to do XYZ task. That is why you are outsourcing. That is why you are hiring. Okay. Your employees should always make you more money than you pay them. That's the value of having somebody help you out. And it's also nice because then they develop their own responsibilities, and that kind of takes some more stuff off of your plate to focus on higher leverage tasks that will ultimately pay you more money. So obviously the struggle I'm likely to face soon is the feeling of burnout, but it's a short sprint. That's how I'm looking at it. It's not a marathon, right? The hiring process, all in all, is going to take 2 to 3 weeks to get everyone from buyers trained to the sourcers trained, right? We already hired the sourcers. So I'm expecting another 1 to 2 weeks, I guess, of hiring and like in-depth training. And then after that, they should be good to go. And from there, it's just going to be feedback and constant feedback and improvements. So that's going to be pretty much everything for like what I'm going to be working on this week, essentially. And then just to give you guys a little bit of an outlook for what's on the horizon here, for next week, I think I'm going to get deep into sourcer training and complete the training week, right? So like I was saying, we're going to get done with all of the sourcers training modules and kind of wrap that up so that they are ready to go for their first day, which is going to be really interesting. I hope that goes well, right? It's always sometimes a gamble with this stuff. So yeah, just got to hope everything goes well there. And then the second thing I plan to work on is hiring that purchase order buyer and begin the training process for that as well. And just overall more hiring, right? Got to stay focused on moving the needle while handling extra obligations. Again, it's going to be a really tough sprint. Workload's probably going to be triple the amount that it is right now, but I'm going to be cooling by like May or June. So that's like really the plan. That's hopefully the plan, is to be good and ultimately have really good preparation and systems in place for Q4. So that's everything that I have on the horizon, essentially. All right. And with all that stuff out of the way, that's going to wrap up this week's video. And if you guys want more help on how to start or scale your arbitrage business, I have a bunch of videos so far linked into my YouTube channel. You can find those just in the suggested, or you can just go to my page. And also I have that newsletter you can sign up to if you want even more inside scoop. So with all that out of the way, I will catch you guys next week for episode 12, and I will see you then. Peace out.